Good evening, YouTube. I'm sure many of you are well in tune with the current buzz surrounding the Electoral College in all its glory. No doubt many are letting their political bent influence the way they feel about it in the immediate aftermath here of the 2016 election, but many others are trying to have an actual rational conversation as to whether or not this is the best system we could be using, or indeed if this is even a good system at all. My position on the Electoral College is now as it has been for many years. I believe it is a weak and antiquated system. But before we talk about my criticisms, as well as some of the defenses of this system, one thing I feel the need to check at the door here, before I proceed any further in conversation, is the fact that though I believe our electoral system needs reform, I absolutely do not believe such reform, if it hypothetically happened quickly, should change the outcome of this current election. There's something extremely uncouth about trying to move the goalposts after the results are decided. It's an infantile behavior and would rightly cause more civil unrest than is warranted given the already great amount we seem to be facing. So first, let's explain why the Electoral College exists. This system goes all the way back to the inception of our country. Back then, it was determined that the people would vote for an electorate district by district, whom they essentially entrusted their vote towards, for the main presidential election. In an era of antiquity, this system actually made a good deal of sense. For starters, absent modern technology, counting up and tallying up the votes is no easy chore. To compartmentalize this process over time and to a smaller electorate made sense, practically and logistically. Additionally, we're talking about a system whose inception was before the age of information. People couldn't just hop onto Google or turn on a television and learn everything they wanted to know about the running candidates and more. So it was a lot easier and logical to defer to their trusted officials who they would ultimately turn to cast the decisive votes. But a lot has changed over the past 2.5 centuries. We now live in an era where the entire knowledge base of mankind sits inside a 5-inch long piece of plastic in each of our pockets. We are all connected all the time. We are all getting real-time updates on everything we possibly want them on, and many things we even don't. Ignorance is not an excuse anymore. Logistical tallying and processing power cannot be excuses anymore either. Some more facts include electors who vote against the consensus of their state are officially known as, quote, faithless electors. And they are actually punished in 29 states plus the District of Columbia. In other words, though, it is legal in 21 states for electors to be, quote, faithless electors. Though it's also worth noting that faithless electors have never swung the outcome of an election, and this behavior is extremely uncommon, though not unprecedented. 48 out of our 50 states are what are called, quote, winner-takes-all states. This means that if one candidate beats another candidate by even a single vote in 48 of our states, the victorious candidate takes all of the electoral votes for that state. There are only 2 states that are not, quote, winner-takes-all states. Those are Maine and Nebraska. In those 2 states, the electoral votes are actually divided proportionately based on the percentage allocated from the individual popular votes. So in the age of information, why do we cling on to such an old system? What are its merits? What are its downfalls? The biggest defense that I've personally stumbled across when I see defenses of the Electoral College is that this system helps bar big cities, which are very populous and often like thinking, from dominating the electorate. As a matter of fact, the system is scaled in such a way that the least populous states do have the most electoral votes per capita. This is because a state is granted equivalent number of electoral votes as their congressional representation. And while the House of Representatives scales by the state's population, the Senate, as I'm sure most of you know, does not. Every state has 2 senators. Therefore, our least populous states, such as Wyoming or Alaska, get 3 electoral votes essentially by default. Defenders here believe this helps safeguard the rural voices, which are often not aligned with the significantly more populous urban ones. Another defense of this system is that it strengthens individual states' rights. The rationale here is essentially that a state of X population should have more pull than an equivalent subpopulation of a much larger state. Yet another defense is that this system bulwarks against election fraud. For instance, if only, say, one particular polling center, or hell, let's even say one particular state, experiences some deep fraud, the impact would be severely limited by the bounds of this system. The only other defense I'm aware of, which, as you'll see shortly, can also double as a criticism based on perspective, is that this system suppresses third parties from effectively having a chance. Those who consider this a good aspect consider it so because they believe a two-party system affords a stability that a more poly-party system would not. And now for some criticisms, which is, as I've already admitted, the side of the fence that I still find myself sitting. First, and I think foremost, it is entirely possible for a majority of American people to vote for a candidate that does not win. Many people, myself included, believe that a democracy means the winner is the candidate who, at the end of the day, the most individual American people voted for. I don't think further analysis to this point is necessary. Secondly, I do not agree with the rationale that it is fair to put more electoral weight based on geography rather than strictly by populace. This is to say that I do not believe that an American individual who happens to live in a major city deserves a vote with a smaller weight than a voter who lives in a cornfield in Wyoming. It is true that opinions correlate, at least in part geographically, and to be fair, I do personally find this fact a bit annoying. Geographic tribalism is annoying. But it's also a matter of fact that it does seem more logical to care about the will of more people, does it not? As an analogy, this is like answering a trolley problem where, one of those problems where one person is tied to the tracks, 5 are tied to the other, and you're the one with the switch to pick which side the train crushes. To me, this is like answering and rationalizing to flip the switch to run over the 5 people because it, quote, wasn't fair that they were the majority. To be clear, I don't believe that this means the farmer from Wyoming always deserves to lose. But it also seems to be the fact that this isn't even a major concern. For one, geographically alike people have monopoly on the votes of their local officials, who, not incidentally, have a more direct impact on their neighborhoods. And at least in my adult lifetime, I'm 29 for any who care, the presidential elections were never a complete runaway. Both major candidates always seem to turn up at least relatively close in the popular vote. This isn't a, quote, one party is doomed to lose every time situation. So again, while one can argue a geographical skew in opinion, my counter-argument is simply to be a better candidate. A candidate who is impeccably logical, eloquent, articulate, charismatic, and knowledgeable. And a less than dubious track record would also help, and probably almost always beat a candidate who is weaker in most or all said domains. Thirdly, the current system makes throwaway votes out of many votes in most states. If you aren't a Democrat in New York or California, or if you aren't a Republican in Mississippi or Arkansas, for instance, or rather voting those parties, your voting ballot would better serve you to wipe your ass. And this isn't just hyperbole on my part. Since most states are winner-takes-all states, states with heavy political skews, or really political skews at all almost, eliminate their non-conforming voters entirely. While so many people hold such contempt for those who don't vote, it is true that if they don't live in a swing state, which is a state where both major parties are around equally popular, their vote probably won't make a difference. This is also, of course, barring the two states that are not winner-takes-all states. And just for some more information, swing states typically include Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, and to a slightly lesser degree, Colorado. Fourthly, in line with my third point, and as we stated previously, this system suppresses third parties. Many, myself included, hold this as a worthy criticism of the system. A mostly winner-takes-all system undermines the votes that were accrued by a third party. I'm sure I'm not the only one who notices that the results of third parties are almost barely talked about in electoral aftermath. Some will lament how those votes could have changed the outcome for the loser, but that's about it. I, for one, would love to see a true tally of the votes lined up alongside the big two. Maybe seeing the actual progress the third parties did make would ultimately help build their platform and their credibility. Of course, to that end, they also should have better candidates. But that's just a personal opinion aside. Fifthly, since so few states are swing states, this heavily affects the mindset of those on the campaign trail. The swing states, alongside with the two states that are not winner-takes-all states, get far and away the most focus by presidential candidates, and the most money campaigning is spent in those states. The swing states end up getting extremely disproportionate focus in the political pandering of the candidates. The absence of this system would make better, more evenly distributed campaigning, and perhaps, I dare say, better and more well-rounded candidates. Sixthly, while there is not much of a historical precedent for this worry, it is still worrisome that in a great many states it is entirely possible for those in the Electoral College to vote against the will of the people they are supposed to represent. This doesn't happen often, but the possibility is still contemptible. Seventhly, and again, this is also without historical precedent, but it is actually possible in this current system in place to win the presidential election with only 22 or roughly 22% of the popular vote. For this to happen, we have to assume no faithless electors, all eligible voters are voting, and the hypothetical winner here to take the lion's share of the smaller states by a single vote. Again, we're talking an extremely contrived and unlikely scenario. So yeah, while we've never seen this sort of precedent, and honestly probably never will, the sheer potential of 22% of the popular vote winning the election still, I think, should at least raise some eyebrows. Well, at any rate, that's all I've got, folks. Do I like this system? No, I don't. I do think this system needs reform. At the very least, I would love to see more states become like Maine and Nebraska, where they are not winner-takes-all states. But I even think more significant reforms could be in order. What do you think? Did I miss any relevant points? Do you think I got this all wrong? I'm looking forward to the feedback from any and all who are interested and were kind enough to listen to my musings. Until next time, this is Nick, signing out.